Thank you. I'm so sorry. I did think we were recording, so thank you so much for that reminder. So for folks watching the video, you did miss out on the joy of me cloning and forking a repo. But just to recap, we're going to walk through and code the bank accounts problem and write some object-oriented Python, which will be fun. So first of all, I want to get rid of some of this stuff. Like, I want to just get rid of the stuff in this comments that doesn't tell me what it needs to do. It says I'm going to need a bank class. It says I'm going to need an account class. My instructions haven't given me a lot of information about the bank class yet. For the account, it does give us some good information. And then just stepping back and I'm looking over, I have in another monitor, I have the README open as well. And I always like to get an overview of the whole task to make sure that there's not like this one part that will affect another, or see if there's any gotchas. So I see that there's some stuff about air handling that we can come back to. I see that creating an owner class is sort of an optional stretch goal, so we can come back to that later. And then I see that there's a part 2. And then I see that there's stuff with a CSV data file. And to be honest, we might come back to that later, but that is nice to know, because I know, hey, when I'm building this, if I can do a couple things along the way that will make refactoring it later to import a CSV, then that's not the worst thing. And I do see that in the CSV, our data will be ID, balance, and an open date. And I'm also looking in the CSV file again in the README for this. And I'm seeing that, actually, I might as well just do this here so we can see this. So I'm looking at this part with the CSV file. And I see that we're going to want to also then, we have a good amount of information for owners. So this kind of defines a lot of useful information about like what information our class should hold, and then maybe like what arguments we're going to be passing to the class constructor. Again, stepping through here, I see there's something about inheritance in step 3. I see we're creating a savings account class. It's going to inherit behavior, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of pieces here. And to be honest, well, we've got till 5:30. So maybe what I'll do is I'll code through this till about 5:15, and then we can switch gears to do stand down. How does that sound to folks? Actually, can I get a couple thumbs ups, thumbs downs? And for those who are joining, this is the OOP bank accounts problem. Awesome. And I'll try and check in about 10-15 minutes. That said, as I go, please ask questions. And also, if I forget to check in with the class as a whole, please remind me. That would actually help me a lot, especially at the end of the day. But so I've kind of skimmed over this. Like, I kind of have a rough big picture idea of where I'm going. Like, we're going to have a bank class, an account class, at some point an owner class, a savings account class that inherits from an account. We're going to read from a CSV file. But none of that stuff is like an immediate barrier to just kind of implementing the step 1. And honestly, there's nothing that we're doing with this bank class yet. So I'm not even going to worry about it. And I'm just going to go ahead and create the account class and start there. And now I've got an account class. It does nothing. I think for my sanity, I will do my account equals account. And then way down here in the terminal, this really, I'm just doing this to make sure I don't have typos. And again, I really like to run my code as often as I can when I'm developing. And in fact, I do have a typo. That should be self. And I see that a new account should be created with an ID and an initial balance. So let's go ahead and pass those in as arguments to our constructor. And let's modify this now. And I'll use my name. And I have $100, which is a nice round number. And it works. And I think I'm going to add a dunder string method to my class because it is a nice way to get information about a class pretty easily. And I think we want to print self.id. And again, this is me being lazy and not looking up how to use a Python F string. Self.balance. And here, now instead of printing it works, we can print my account. And I did something wrong, which is great because I haven't written a lot of code. So this should be easy to find. And it says can only concatenate string, not int to string. Can anyone remind me off the top of their head, how do I parse an integer to a string in Python? Sorry?
str.
It's just as beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, I wasn't sure if I had to import something. This is a great example of why I made the same mistake I did earlier, which is we don't want to print this. We want to return this. The dunder str method should return a string. And because this logic was kind of complex, I just wanted to put it on its own line, and then we have the return statement, and it's a little easier to read. And again, this is a great reason why like running your code, like every tiny chunk of work is a really good habit. I would also commit my code at this point, because now that my code's in a working state, and sort of if I try to commit my code every time it's in a working state, if I ever have to go back, I know that my code will be in a good state. So that's the first part of that requirement knocked off. And I know I'm moving a bit fast because it's the end of the day for the review session. And also just to reiterate, I've done this a lot. So it is not, you folks will not kind of be going through this process as quickly. I know too that like watching someone do it, it all goes like very smooth, and that's not the reality at all. And you know, if I was working on a problem I hadn't seen in a domain where I was learning as well, this would be a much slower process too. So the next step is we know that we want to make a withdraw method. And this is on too many lines, so I'm going to put it on a bunch of lines so it's easier to read. And now I can just kind of focus on the part that I care about, which is I want to create a method named withdraw. And we need to pass in self. And it accepts a single parameter, which represents the amount of money that will be withdrawn. So I'll just name it amounts to withdraw. So what are the two things that this withdrawal method has to do? I could use a little help here, especially as I really do want to demonstrate some good techniques and sort of programming like habits and object-oriented design principles, but also, I'm not the one doing the problem, so to speak, that this is for us. So someone help me out. What are the two things this withdrawal method has to do?
You gotta check zero balance and then withdraw, and then adjust the balance.
What was the first part?
Check for well, so it doesn't dip below $0.
Oh, well, that's an excellent point. I actually totally didn't think about zero balance, but that is a very, very good point. So first of all, not withdraw if amount to withdraw is greater than available balance. Exactly as you said, zero balance. And Chris, thank you. And then if we can withdraw, calculate new balance, and then return the new balance. So this makes life a lot easier. And in fact, I'm sort of going a little, not overboard, but heavy on the pseudocoding, because now I can just really say if amount to withdraw is greater than self dot balance. And what should we do if there's zero balance?
The funds unavailable, or return the balance available.
Funds unavailable, return the balance available. I'm also, let's see, I'm looking at the error handling in the requirement, and it says it should output a warning message and return the original unmodified balance. Okay, so exactly. Thank you. Yeah, let's see. Funds unavailable. Current balance is, and there is undoubtedly a better, more friendlier error message that we can and should write. However, to get this going, that's all we need. And in fact, I think I want to go ahead and test this out right now. And print my account dot withdraw 1000. And that should trigger this error. Or trigger this error state, rather. It's not an error in the program. It's more of like an error case that we want our program to handle. And I ran into the same problem, which is kind of a pain because I keep doing this. So I think what I'm going to do, in fact, is I'm going to write a helper method. Balance to string. Because the way that I'm writing this code, where I'm being lazy and using the plus for string concatenation, that's going to happen all the time. With an F string, we might not run into this issue. Oh, and this needs to be a method call. So that's not, there's probably a more elegant way to do this. However, I will say, especially as our classes get more complex, it is not uncommon to have methods that essentially do like common formatting of data for us. So this is a pattern you will see and use, and that definitely has its place. And in fact, I could even make this a getter, I think, and then I wouldn't have to call it. Can someone confirm that for me? I don't remember Python getters off the top of my head. Is there not like a
No, I
decorator?
don't think there's any particular special formatting for those, Adam.
What if I do
You put
Is it-
at property up, yep.
property? Yep, and in fact, let's call this balance str, short for balance string. It's a bit shorter to write. And now let's see if that works. And that's working. And that's a good example actually of why like a getter can be nice. Because if I'm writing this kind of like formatting method, then to be honest, having to call it is a little annoying when you're and easy to forget. So just kind of rolling through this, we have this first part working where if we don't have enough money, then we return an error. And just moving on in my method now. If I wanted to, I could put an else statement here. But I actually don't have to because like putting an if statement for what we don't want to have happen first is called a guard. And if we do trip this if clause, then the function will just return and execution won't continue. So now like sufficient funds. And this is insufficient funds. Now we want to calculate the new balance. Minus amount to withdraw, and then we just return the new balance. And now, if I try to withdraw $90, that should work. So I put $100 in there to begin with. And that is working, which is great. I saw, oh, overdraft charges. Yeah, and a $3 charge, check the balance. Yeah, well, you know, if we end up working for the bank, then we will end up writing a method named overdraft charge, and that's exactly how you would do it. Like I can almost promise somewhere in some Java code base somewhere, there is a method on a class to add the overdraft charge. Let me just check in with folks. Because I know it's the end of the day too. Is this helpful, and how is the pace of this? Are folks feeling good?
Pace is fine.
Okay, awesome. Awesome, and I'm glad it's helpful. Yeah, and I just apologize again for getting the ball rolling a little late on this. I think in 10 minutes we'll switch gears so we can do our stand down proper. So now we're kind of rolling along. We've got this withdrawal method working. And now we probably need to look at this deposit method and tackle that one next. And we're just going to kind of do it the same way. And as you can see, like there's definitely like a flow that you can get into. And it's the same kind of thing, which is great. And I'm not sure, can anyone tell me, is there like an error case or an edge case I need to worry about with depositing? I think not. I don't think there is one. I do want to point out how, I do think it makes a huge difference to name variables in ways that help us understand what that variable represents in the context of our program. Other programmers will definitely appreciate it. I've only gotten positive feedback on the readability of my code in technical interviews, so it certainly doesn't hurt. And most of all, as our programs get bigger, it helps a lot. And sometimes when you struggle with what to name a variable or a function, that's a sign that there may be some thinking or complexity to the problem that we haven't accurately captured yet. So it can help you understand how to write the code to solve the problem too. So now we have to update the new balance. We have to update the balance. Plus amount to deposit. And again, we just return self.balance. And let's go ahead and print my accounts deposit. And let's deposit. Oh, I don't know. $100. And now I should have 110. And it can be nice to add comments like this too, so that when you look at what you run, you can look at your comment and double check that that's correct. And that can actually really help a lot. And 110, that's exactly what I want. So I know that I'm doing great. The nice thing about leaving all these other print statements is it confirms that I haven't accidentally done something to break any of the other parts of my code. And then the last part is accessing the current balance of an account at any given time. You know, I think we already have that. Like, I think I can just do self.balance. But I could be wrong. It should be my account.balance. I could be forgetting how Python works, but we're good. And it is good practice probably to wrap that in a property or like a method with a property decorator. The idea being that things that your class exposes to other parts of the program should be sort of like formalized a little bit, but that's not so critical, to be honest. Awesome. So I think actually this is a really good point for me to check in with the class. What would be helpful to look at next in this bank problem? Because it does have a lot of parts and we probably can't get through them all today. So like we could create the owner class, we could create the bank class and do stuff with it. What would people like to see next? We could do CSV importing, or we could just do stand down if people's brains are fading. CSV. A lot of CSVs. Who else is thumbs up on the CSV? Okay, let's do it. I'm not gonna lie, CSVs aren't my favorite either. They are good to do. So I think that's a wise call. We can embrace the annoying part first. So again, I'm going to first I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup. We'll worry about making the bank class when we get there. We don't need this. We don't need this. I really should install a linter to enforce rules, but like this is good practice. You definitely want like an empty space between your different method declarations. And in general, you'll see programmers will leave an empty line between like the large chunks, like different chunks of logic in a program. Also, because there are keyboard shortcuts to move around by section, essentially. So again, just kind of continuing in this vein, I'm going to grab the requirements for part 2. And I'm just going to go ahead and paste them. I'm using VS Code has what's called like a mode for using this, the style of an older text editor Vim that has all these crazy keyboard shortcuts. But there is also a VS Code like friendly way to do multiple cursors, to edit multiple lines at once the way I just did, which is can be super useful. I'm also going to go ahead and poke my head in at these CSV files. I'm gonna, I think, look at the requirements. So it looks like it's really the second part of the requirement here that's giving us the specific information we need. The first part, it's saying update this account class, should be able to handle everything from the CSV file. Make sure we can create a new instance of our account class using that data. So they're basically giving us a hint. And then it's really this part here that has the requirements, which is saying we want to add a method named all accounts, should return collection of account instances. Okay, it's interesting. I won't lie, I would have thought of that as something maybe that would make a little more sense to belong to a bank class. So maybe we want to modify that, but we can always tweak that later. The main thing I think is we should look at the CSV files to see what data from those we care about right now for creating accounts. And actually, I'm looking through this and I'm seeing there are a couple more steps and they're giving us some more information. And it really is, and I'll jump back to the README to do this. So we do need to read through this a bit more because they're telling us to do a couple things. They're telling us the data in the CSV file, what it looks like. And then there's this information about owners, and we haven't really gotten to owners yet. It looks like the key thing is there's an account ID and there will be an owner ID. Now is a good point to start looking at the files themselves. VS Code is telling me it has some sort of extension that's nice for CSV files. And I'm going to ignore all of them because really we just want to look at this like a text file without trying to get fancy. So this is probably the one that we care about because this has the account number. It has the balance and it has the date and time in some sort of format that the account was opened. And the advice from the README was good, which was like our constructor should be able to accept this. Right, again, I totally copied, and this is going to be a string. And I think Python will take care of that part of it for us. I totally copied this line from the CSV file. And this is probably the right starting point for us because ID should be fine. Initial balance should be fine, but we don't have an open date. So that's going to have to be the next thing that we do before we mess with the file itself. And we're going to have to do two things. We're going to have to parse open date from string to date. And then we're going to have to set open date bar on a class. And can someone actually help me with maybe the logic to read that date time string and parse it into Well, you know what? I actually take that back. Let's not even worry about parsing it into some sort of Python date object. Nothing in the requirements requires us to do that yet. And we can actually get a lot done just leaving it as a string. And to be honest, a lot of the time, we will store dates as strings in the database because when your database is running on a server and that server has its own time zone and the database itself can have its own time zone. And so with time stuff with servers for web apps, that is a really common way to really screw stuff up. Because if your server is like reading a date string and converting it to a date time object, but like using its time zone that isn't the one it should be using because the user's in a different time zone, then that can become a really big pain. So now all of my previous examples should break because we're missing an argument. And I'm going to go ahead and just copy this value. And again, you know, you can also highlight and use Control-C or Command-C, which is what I would recommend. And let's pass this in. And let's also print out the open date to make sure that I didn't do something silly. And so now we're cooking. We got that part done. That's a big part. Let me stop checking. How are people feeling about this? Feeling good? Cool. Yeah, and I want to reiterate, like, this is never as smooth as it is watching the demo. I've done this problem before and I've been programming for something like 10 years, but the flow of like write out some pseudocode, do work in really small chunks, after each little chunk, run your code and see if it works. That is an incredibly useful like workflow pattern to get into. So now we're almost there. I think the last question really is, how do we import from the CSV file? And I'm skimming through this a bit. It doesn't seem to really specify, though I could be missing something. Can someone help me? And is there an instruction in the assignment of how we, like, do we create an import method? Or how did someone do it?
It doesn't specify. I just did regular CSV reader since there's no like initial label or dictionary item that we're pulling from, but people can do other stuff.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. And I think the tricky part is, and I'm looking through this, and in fact, let me open the README here, because I will say I do feel like there is something here that maybe we should tweak in this assignment, which is, what is the bank class doing? Yeah, and I mean, I'm doing a Control F or Command F to search through the README for every instance of the word bank. And what is conspicuously missing is any sort of instructions about what exactly should be going in that bank class. And I think that is something we could improve here. At the same time, it is also not uncommon that you get a specification that misses stuff. And there are a couple clues. We're seeing that a bank should have a relationship where it holds an accounts class and an owners class. I think what is kind of confusing is that we are also told to add like these class methods, all accounts, and then also like find accounts by ID. And I'm pretty sure a Python class method, I want to say that's the equivalent of a static method, correct? You like, we can, like for a Python class method, I can do accounts, all accounts, if such a thing existed. And I'm Googling that right now too. And in fact, let me just bring that over here and we can confirm. Yeah, this is often called a static method, like in other languages. We call it on the class itself, not a specific object instance. So it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Eric, that's a really good question. Does Python have a static method? And I apologize. We will probably have to wrap up soon so we can do stand down. It looks like there is a static method, and honestly, it looks like the differences are not like massive. And honestly, my first instinct is that the account class should not be responsible for looking at all the other accounts. I feel like it makes more sense to do that on the bank class, and that we probably need to revise this problem a bit. Does that make sense to people? So I'm going to do this in 2 steps. I'm going to comment all this stuff out, first of all, because it's great to have, but not necessary for our next step. So step 1 is create a bunch of accounts from a CSV and add to a list. Step 2 is bundle all that logic up into a method on bank class, right? Bank dot import accounts. So that's how I'm going to tackle this in 2 parts to make my life simpler. So I want to say, and I hope that that's an empty list in Python. And you folks can't see me doing this right now, but I'm Googling empty lists in Python. And it does look like it. And in fact, let me go ahead and just Google Python read from CSV, because I need to refresh myself. And this looks helpful. I think I can probably copy this and work with it. And we're going to need to import from the CSV as well. So first off, let me, and I will say, straight up copying and pasting code is dangerous. I do kind of actually recommend typing it out. It also gives you the chance to, as you're typing the code out that you're looking at a guide, see if there are things that you need to change that are going to be a problem. So I think the first thing is we need to point to the right path. And I'm going to start by saying, I think I know how to do this, and then if not, we'll change it. So, and just to kind of step back for a sec, because now we do have to think about where in our file system the program is. Print working directory, PWD, shows me where I am in VS Code. LS shows me the files in that directory. This is my file that I care about. Relative to where I'm going to run this, because when I run it, I'm running this command from the same place. If I wanted to, I could do Python, I could run my program this way, and I would be running it from a different directory. And this error is just from the CSV stuff. So I know that the file name that I'm interested in is accounts. I know that the path from where this program is going, where I'm going to run this program, because I'm just deciding where I'm going to run it on the command line, is the dot indicates the current directory where we are. And then we go to support. And that is the path from here to there. And as an example, there's a command line program called cat that prints out whatever you feed into it as text. Like I just printed out my Python main.py file, or I can print out the README. And I can also print out going from relative to where I'm running this command to the support directory, the accounts CSV file. So I might need to do an extra step with Python, but that should get me most of the way there. This is asking like what indicates a new line. It's an empty string right now, and I think that'll be okay. So we'll just leave that and we'll see. Spam reader doesn't make sense because that's not what we're doing. What we're doing is we're getting a bunch of accounts. And I'll rename this to avoid any potential variable conflict. And the delimiter is kind of the kicker. And I don't know why that example uses a space, because for most CSV files, it's going to be a comma that separates the different parts of it. And I don't know what quote chart does, and I don't think we need it. So I'm going to get rid of it. And I'm going to try this and just see what happens. Just see if it works. Okay, so this is cool, because now I think that's the only print statement that's currently running in here. Let me make sure I ran what I thought I ran. Yep, I ran the Python command and not the cat command. So that tells us that we are successfully reading from that CSV file. And if I want to really double check, I'll stick something inside the CSV file. I'll run it again. There's that thing I just added. Now, you know, because it's been a long day and it's easy for me to make mistakes, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I'm successfully reading from the CSV file, and that we've got each row right here that's being printed out as a string. And I probably need to change this because we need to get each part of the CSV file. And actually, this is where, and actually that's even better, because it looks like CSV Reader is breaking the CSV file up. Each row becomes a list, and it does that for us. So, like for instance, now if I wanted to, I could do all accounts push accounts and print them all out. What is, can someone correct me? Push is not the right command with a list.
Append.
Thank you. So that works exactly like what we want. But instead of the raw account data, and let's call this accounts. Like, I'll just call this raw account. I think you'll often see like accounts data row, something like that. Let's create a new account. But there is a problem here. Actually, there might not be a problem here. We're not going to worry about the formatter. It looks like so all that looks fine. Let's see, what did it not like here? Okay, that's fine. I think I just had a space wrong. And because Python is Python, it got very particular about that. So I've got this error message now. It's happening on line 56. It says it's missing 2 initial arguments. What's my problem here? Why isn't this working?
The only argument is the whole array, not each element in the array.
Yeah. To pop back to our init method for the account, it needs 3 arguments: ID, initial balance, and open date. But this gives me like a whole row of stuff. And I think I will just name this count row. And we can do, I will write it like this because this is probably not the right Python way to do it, but I'm used to it from JavaScript. Like, instead of doing this, which is it's relatively readable, but I've gotten used to this from JavaScript, for better or worse. And let's see what happens now. So it looks like list index out of range. 0, 1, 2. I'm a little surprised because I would have thought there are 3 things in there. Let's put a print statement in here and look at it again. Unexpected indents.
It's because you still have the foo bar in your CSV file, I think.
Oh my God. Thank you. Oh, I didn't save that. Yep. Thank you. That is one of the dangers of modifying and messing with data. Okay, so this is actually working even though it's a big mess right now. Because what's happening is this print statement is printing out a list of account objects, and it's just the print statement can't handle the list and the account object inside it and figure out how to convert it to a string because we haven't given it enough direction. So we're just seeing this. But let me, we're almost home with using this with the bank class. So I think let me go ahead and do that, and then we'll call it a day because it is 5:40, and I really appreciate people sticking around. So honestly, the most critical thing was prototyping in a simpler fashion without worrying about classes, just to get this stuff working. And actually, I do want to check in and ask folks, what questions do people have? Is there stuff that we can go over? Because I know that working with CSVs has been a pain point for us. And so now is a perfect time to check in about that. And like, if there's any line of this code where you're not sure exactly what's going on, you're probably not the only person wondering, and now is the perfect moment to ask. So I'm curious what's on people's minds. Oh, I see people mentioning Dix Reader. Dix Reader probably is a lot easier. And again, to be honest, that was a bit of my own Python laziness. And I'm so used to working in JavaScript, and I'm not used to having nice language features like Python gives us. Okay, everyone feeling good? Should I wrap it up, put it in the bank class, and start connecting a couple dots? Awesome. And I think you folks can probably tell where this is going, because it's the hard part is never making it complicated, it's making it simple. So we're going to initialize bank. All accounts is going to be an empty list. That's all it's going to be. We're going to create a method called import accounts from CSV. I'm not even going to worry about passing in the CSV file as an argument yet. We can do that later. And then I am just going to go ahead and copy all of this right here and put it inside this method. And there's a little bit of cleanup I'll have to do. Let's see here. That should work okay. That should work okay. I will put this stuff on one line because I think now that we understand that, it'll be a little bit easier to read. And this is really the main, that is, I think, the only difference. We should probably return some sort of information. Let's return the number of accounts added. How do I find the number of items in a list again in Python?
Len.
Is that, and that's an argument that I just do this?
It opens it up and you put the, yeah, there you go.
Awesome. And that also will let us check to make sure that this is working. So now let's do my bank equals bank. My bank import accounts from CSV. Print num accounts and the number of accounts. And let's see if this works. And lo and behold, we get the number 12. That looks right. And that was ridiculously simple. And if we want to, we can do path to file. And here we can do, let me copy this and put this here. And then here, instead of manually hard coding this, we can pass in the path there. So this is, there's like no nice air handling or anything like this. We're trusting that when we call this method, we are passing in a correct path. Otherwise, it'll just throw an error and break everything. And that works again, which is great. And again, I think kind of doing that in like separate steps just makes this process a whole lot easier. So I think we should stop for now because it's 5:45 and it's run really long. And we can wrap up for the day. If people want to stick around longer, I will, but I do want to check in with folks. So let's do this. Let's chat, see what questions people have. I'll pause the recording. We can, actually, let me just pause the recording. We can do our stand down and then we can continue the recording.